The 20th century theologian H. Richard Niebuhr called it the enduring problem. He was referring to the age-old issue of the relationship between the Christian community and the cultures in which it is embedded. In a series of lectures he called Christ and Culture, held at Austin Presbyterian Theological Seminary in 1949, Niebuhr explored several different typical ways the church has navigated this relationship. It wasn't so much a question of which was correct. He wanted to explore the different strategies different parts of the church have taken over the centuries to resolve the problem. In today's reading from 1 Peter, the writer offers one possible answer to this question, and he uses an arresting image: the priesthood. Hello, I'm Stuart Baskin, pastor of First Presbyterian Church of Tyler, Texas, and this is your daily devotional for Wednesday, November 29th, 2023. The writer of 1 Peter neatly captures the tension of Christian community embedded within a non-Christian culture. At the beginning of the letter, which is not included in the daily lectionary readings, he addresses his letter this way: to the exiles of the dispersion in Pontus, Galatia, Cappadocia, Asia, and Bithynia. Exiles of the dispersion. This is language we would ordinarily associate with the Jewish community, but the writer of 1 Peter applies it to the churches in Asia. Then, in tomorrow's reading, he addresses the members of the church as aliens, a term we more often associate with people who have moved from their homeland to a new country. But these are not people who have physically moved, but rather have become aliens within their own cities and towns by virtue of their conversion to Christianity. These two images, exiles and aliens, put the focus on the radical disconnect between the Christian community and the dominant culture in which it was embedded, a Greco-Roman world with its own religion, moral code, and cultural practices. To be Christian in that world was to live under a different religion and moral code, and to shun many of the cultural practices of the dominant society. But in today's reading, the writer uses a very different image, which adds a layer of texture and nuance to his understanding of the relationship between church and culture. And that image is royal priesthood. Here's what he says in the first part of chapter 2. Rid yourselves, therefore, of all malice and guile, insincerity, envy, and all slander. Like newborn infants, long for the pure spiritual milk, so that by it you may grow into salvation, if indeed you have tasted that the Lord is good. Come to him, a living stone, though rejected by mortals, yet chosen and precious in God's sight. And like living stones, let yourselves be built into a spiritual house, to be a holy priesthood, to offer spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For it stands in Scripture, See, I am laying in Zion a stone, a cornerstone chosen and precious, and whoever believes in him will not be put to shame. To you then who believe, he is precious. But for those who do not believe, the stone that the builders rejected has become the very head of the corner, and a stone that makes them stumble, and a rock that makes them fall. They stumble because they disobey the word, as they were destined to do. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's own people, in order that you may proclaim the mighty acts of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. The writer quotes here no fewer than 9 different passages from the Old Testament, from Exodus, from the Psalms, from Isaiah, and from Hosea. The point in all this is that, like Israel, the Christian church has been called out from among the peoples and established as God's holy people, set apart. But set apart, holy, for a purpose. And that's where the priesthood imagery is so important. A priest is one who makes sacrifices to atone for the sins of others. For the Christian community to be a kingdom of priests means that its purpose in being called forth is to intercede on behalf of the world. So you can see there is clearly a dual emphasis here. On the one hand, the church is a bunch of exiles, aliens in a strange land. And yet, the church is also to serve a priestly function on behalf of that same world. These two impulses are hard to reconcile. But that's the point, isn't it? Somehow we Christian people are called to live a distinctive kind of life, separate and apart from the world, and yet a life lived on behalf of the world. If that's hard to reconcile in your mind, you are in very good company. A good part of the entire history of Christianity is all about the ways the church has struggled with this very relationship. It is why Niebuhr called it the enduring problem. Tomorrow, the writer gets into the nitty-gritty of how to live as aliens in a culture that in many ways is at odds with the church. Spoiler alert, his answer is not to separate from the world, but to participate faithfully in it. But for now, may God continue to bless you and keep you in all that you do this day and in all the days ahead.